I'll just go ahead and get started then. It's about almost time. Any stragglers that come in will just miss our introduction here. So I wanted to introduce myself. Let me actually forward the slides here. So my name is Lou Del Zampo. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the really long-named California Community College Technology Center. We are based out of Butte College, out in beautiful Oroville, California. If you want to Google that later, feel free. We work for the Chancellor's Office for the state, so we are funded by the state to do programs that benefit all the colleges, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So we wanted to introduce a project that is sponsored out of the Post-Secondary Education Council, PESC, as a standard offering, building on the PESC standards for financial aid and transcript interchange. But what you'll see, EdExchange goes beyond just transcripts and financial aid documents, and hopefully will benefit the education industry quite a bit. I'd also like to introduce Wes Owen. Wes is a senior developer for the Technology Center and is the lead on EdExchange from a coding point of view. So Wes will be giving a live demonstration of the code right now, a little bit later. And then I wanted to talk about where we are as a project. So introducing the CCC Technology Center, we work with the California Community Colleges in California. That system is the largest network of higher education in the United States for sure. We might be the largest in the world. We haven't really done the work to check it out. We have 112 colleges, soon to be 113, and we're currently serving over 2 million students every year. We just recently were granted authority by the Department of Ed in the state and the Chancellor's Office to begin offering 4-year degrees as well, which is a little new and interesting for everybody. You may ask, why would you have a community college deliver a 4-year degree? Well, it turns out that in certain areas, some of the traditional blue-collar occupations are requesting college degrees, and there aren't a lot of colleges that are focusing in that area. Police and fire services, for example, are one of the areas that we are going to be granting degrees in, but it ranges from nursing technician to actually automotive mechanic as well, 4-year degree in automotive maintenance. Who would have thought? But anyway, so our current initiatives range from a statewide fiber optic network. We offer free 1 gig and 10 gig circuits to the colleges and allow them to provide redundant circuits. So this has been a big win for them, so that they're able to provide failover. They're not dependent on one network strand out to the internet, and as you know, the internet's become mission critical now for every college. We have a common application into college. This is also live. It's called OpenCCC Apply. Last year we had 1.5 million applications flow through the Common App in California. Then we deliver that data down to the student information systems at the colleges through that network. We also have a transcript exchange called eTranscript California, and that precipitated the interest in this project, which we'll talk about. And then we have a number of other initiatives going on right now, again, to benefit all of the colleges in the state with standardized technology. What is EdExchange? EdExchange, as I mentioned, is a PESC proposed standard effort. The basic idea behind EdExchange is very similar to an ATM network. Everybody banks with a particular banking institution, and you have free access to their ATMs, presumably. But it would be a royal pain if you had to go and find your bank in every town that you had to be to. There's these networks, Cirrus and Star and other kinds of things that exist now. And similarly, when you're exchanging educationally related materials, like a transcript or a financial aid document or you say an e-portfolio or something along these lines, it can be very difficult to find a mechanism to get from point A to point B. So the least common denominator is to print out something, stick it in an envelope, hermetically seal it, put it in another envelope to show that you didn't open the first envelope, and then put it in a FedEx envelope and deliver it to the college. That's the least common denominator right now. And if you're lucky, the college accepts fax. Most don't, because they're not sure if you've tampered with it. I don't understand that myself, but most of them don't accept faxes. But at any rate, we'll talk more about that. So this came about as a way to sort of influence the interchange of this information. So it's envisioned as an open data network, a data exchange network for the educational community. It's not limited to transcripts or financial aid documents. It could be any type of file that you want to move from one educational institution to another educational institution in a secure way. You need to have a mechanism for describing the payload of the document, and that's where things like PESC come in handy, because you can make a request for a transcript using an XML interchange, and the institution on the other side of the request knows what you're asking for. If you just sort of send a file over, people are going to be suspicious about what's in the file. So even though you can send it securely through EdExchange, you might want to send only things that are industry standard definition. It's peer-to-peer. This is a big deal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with something called the Texas server. The Texas server was a server hosted by University of Texas that did pretty much the same thing as EdExchange for many, many years, but it was sort of a good idea that the University of Texas, through their good graces, supported. When it became too expensive for them, they decided to hand it off to a vendor, and then it became something that was vendor-owned and no one trusted. So EdExchange came about as a way of providing a mechanism for interchange that didn't require a vendor to be involved. Also, documents are not stored anywhere in EdExchange. You give it over to a server, you pass it over to the other side, and then the document disappears. So that storage of PII or private information is also a concern addressed by EdExchange. And it's web services based, which everybody understands to be a little bit easier now to integrate with rather than a file transfer mechanism, although there's nothing wrong with file transfer either. So how do things work today? So I'll give a personal example. I joined the Technology Center from one of the vendors, one of the sucky vendors, about 9 months ago. And in applying for the CTO position, I was required to provide my transcripts. I had not done that in 25 years. So even though I worked for a transcript vendor, Parchment, I had actually never used the service. So this was a new experience for me. So I had to get my transcripts over to the college. And so I first went to my bachelor's degree school, the University of San Francisco, and I found out that they used a vendor to do that. And so I signed into the vendor's ordering site, ordered up my transcript. They used a proprietary mechanism to contact the University of San Francisco, get the information back. They offered me the opportunity to pay extra to have it expedited via Federal Express, which I did because I wanted to get it done fast. And for the price of $37.50, presumably in a couple of days, my transcript was going to show up at the community college district. I went to my master's degree school, Worcester Polytechnic in Massachusetts. I found out that they had no vendor, but they did offer the flexibility of faxing a form into their site that I could use. They didn't offer any expedited service whatsoever, but they only charged me $15 for this service. I thought that was a great deal. So what they did is they printed it, put it in 3 envelopes, sent it, and gave it to the U.S. Postal Service. Interestingly enough, both colleges believe they support electronic ordering. So I did not understand that myself. And for extra credit in the audience, which one of these 2 transcripts showed up first? Okay, the one that was sent via U.S. mail through the fax service showed up first for $15. It took 4 extra days for the Federal Express envelope to show up at the college. Unbelievable. Anyway, I did not get the requested refund from the sucky vendor either, so that was that. So wouldn't it be nice if when I was ordering the transcript, let's say I had to get my associate degree transcript, my undergraduate transcript, and my graduate transcript from 3 different institutions supported by 3 different vendors. Wouldn't it be nice if I could go to any vendor I wanted to their ordering interface, let's say someone offered a mobile ordering interface where I could just use an applet on my phone and order up my transcripts. It'd be fantastic. So go up, place that into the network. It gets delivered to all these vendors, and it shows up at University of Phoenix where I'm sending the transcripts to. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, that's what EdExchange is attempting to do. It's basically provide a mechanism so that any vendor can deliver a transcript request to any other vendor through EdExchange, and then those vendors can deliver it to the University of Phoenix also through EdExchange. So that's what we're attempting to do with the main goal of the EdExchange project. So how's this work? So it starts with a network server and a directory server. So the directory server is the place where you find out who services the place you want to send your materials to. So let's say this was an ATM network, and I went to Wells Fargo up here on the upper left, and I wanted to get money out of my Bank of America account down here. So at first, Wells Fargo would contact the directory server and say, how do I find out if this guy has the money he claims he wants to get out of his account? So they go and they look up on Sirius or Star or one of those networks and find out where my account is. It turns out it's at Bank of America, and they make the request in a standardized way. And the ATM machine says, hey, Lou, you're short a few bucks on your account, but you can take $100 out if you really want to. So I press the button, I say I want my $100. They go and they tell Bank of America that we're taking $100 out. Bank of America sends that to Wells Fargo and says, here's your $100, or whatever the moral equivalent is over the ATM network. And then $100 spits out of the ATM machine. So in the case of EdExchange, similarly, if this is, I want to send something to University of Phoenix, I go and I find out who services University of Phoenix. It turns out, by looking at the directory server, that University of Phoenix hosts their own network server. So I get the address of the network server. I find out that they accept EDI as well as XML. The server I'm talking to here figures out, well, the best mechanism for me is XML, so it does that negotiation. And then an XML document is exchanged through this EdExchange envelope to that network server that represents University of Phoenix from my institution. And Wes will demonstrate this a little bit later. So, as I mentioned, the directory server's main purpose is to provide that repository of validated and verified destinations and what services that destination provides. So a destination could be a sender or a receiver. A sender gets requests, so they're a destination for a request. And a receiver gets documents that are sent by the sender. So both of those things are supported in the directory server. Now, we've envisioned a lot of things, like perhaps there will be multiple vendors or multiple paths to a destination. And they're differentiated by level of service. Like one provider can deliver a paper document, and they only charge $5. Whereas another vendor delivers data in EDI format, and they charge $15. And another delivers data in XML, and they charge $20. And so depending on what your desires are, you can either make that visible to the end user who's making the request, or you can negotiate it through software and pick whichever one you want. But the directory server is basically just that. It's a repository of information about this. We've also looked and thought about perhaps there would be security requirements that the destination supports. For example, it might say, you must use shibboleth to authenticate to the server before you deliver it. You must encrypt the payload using certain encryption mechanisms. So there's a lot of other things we've thought about, but we really haven't explored that very much just yet. We have a reference implementation, which is a Java server. Wes can discuss that a little bit. And basically, PESC is going to pick people who will run the service. So it won't be just anybody that can put a directory server up. It'll be an approved server. That way it differs a little bit from DNS in that there's a number of service providers for DNS. We're envisioning just one to start with. The network server is an endpoint. We also have another Java server reference implementation for that. It can look up, send, and receive. Very, very basic mechanism. This could be local to an institution, like University of Phoenix. They can load it up themselves. Or it could be something that is, in fact, hosted by a vendor on behalf of a number of institutions. That's probably going to be the likely deployment initially, but we're hoping that from an educational point of view that more institutions pick this up and do it themselves, because I think it will lower the costs for all the students as well as the alumni if that happens. So where are we? We have a functional alpha version complete. We are hoping to begin a pilot. I'll talk about that in a little bit very soon. We've got a number of people who are interested in participating in the pilot. I will talk about that a little bit later too. But ideally, we want to have at least 2 transcript vendors and 2 institutions that will be on the network to show the various different workflows of how things work. We've received a lot of very, very strong interest in institutions that will be ready to use it once it's ready to deploy. So we're very excited about the response so far, but we're still working through the kinks, basically. And later on, I'll talk about some of the business side questions that remain. The technology is in pretty good shape, though. Okay, so Wes, it's up to you.
So what we have is basically 2 Tomcat wars, and they run into a Tomcat instance. And the first one would be the directory server. And a lot of this is like web services, so it's kind of what we're showing is just how the data is going to be moving back and forth from the network server to the directory server.
And this is up on Git, right?
Yeah, this is a GitHub project. I believe it is, let me see.
I had that up on the other slide.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a GitHub project. I recently split the 2 projects, the directory server and the network server. So now there's 2. There's one for the directory server and one for the network server. When it builds a WAR, and then you can implement that into Tomcat. And then from there, on the directory server side, you will have basically a few tables, and you can access it through the web interface, just through, or through a browser if you want. And you could see what kind of like the tables look like, and you can add organizations or any of the other kind of entities, contacts. You can edit them, you can delete them. And that's just kind of like the front end of the directory server. There's nothing too interesting about that, other than it just is a kind of a CRUD interface to the database tables. On the network server side, that's where the interaction happens to the directory server. So normally, what would happen is you would want to transfer a file. So you could, this is kind of like all these values here would be just like the straight values that the web service uses. But what you could do is there's REST and SOAP interfaces or APIs to interact with the directory server, and you can grab all that information, such as like the delivery options and the organizations, from the network server side. So you could, build your own kind of like recipe for pulling that information and showing it to the user. So, like for instance, this one is the delivery options web service interface. It pulls back JSON data for all the delivery options. So that could be implemented into those input files. So what I'm showing here is the recipient is where the transferred file would be going to, and I'm just using the value 2 because that's the ID of the the other network server. The sender and the network server can, like Lou was saying, it can be different. So if there's like a chain of from going from one place to another, if there's some in-between network servers, that's where that comes in. You pick a file. This one's XML, so then you would tell it XML, and then that is that file format is also a database table on the directory server side. So you have certain formats you can define, and that lets the other network server know what's being transferred. Hitting send, like I was saying, it's a web service, so you don't really see a lot going on. But if you go back to the home page here, this is showing kind of like just a list of the transactions. So there's just one transaction table in on the network server, and that's just listing all the transfers going and coming. So I did a few last night. So there's most of these are send. We're sending something from this network server to another. I don't have another one set up, but what would happen is we sent that file to another network server. So the transaction record in our network server A here, would note that we sent something, and on the B side, it would receive it, put a record into its transaction table database, do whatever it needs to do with that file, and then send back to this network server, hey, I got the file, everything's cool. And this network server would update that transaction record to let you know when it was received. And if the status obviously was okay. In this case, it says false or true, a Boolean value. So we can pull those. These were set up last night, but that's the difference between the status, the incomplete and the complete. So like I said, on the network server has access to the directory server. Right now, it has access to everything. So it can create organizations, it can edit them, it can remove them. As we progress into the project, obviously those things are going to change. There's going to be rules set up for what can be done. But right now, it's pretty much there's full access. And like I said before, there's the REST interface, which is what we're developing now, and then the SOAP interface. There's a class set up by Apache CXF, and it's all ready to go. All we have to do is basically, when we finalize and solidify the REST interfaces, we're just, I can just throw them into just translate them into the SOAP calls. But on the network server side, we have all these APIs for creating and editing and searching. Is probably the most important one, is searching for organizations and by any kind of attribute that the organization has, whether it's the ID, the member ID, the web service URL, and whatnot. So all these are possible, and there's also a couple different ways you can do it. You can do get or post, so whatever your flavor, you can do that. In this case, I'm searching for organizations, or what is this? This is delivery options. So I'm searching for delivery options, in this case, that where the error status is set to true, meaning that they want to be notified of an error status, or that that delivery option has the ability to error notify. And in this case, they're all true. If I switch it to false, search, And so that's set up through just a typical get AJAX call. It goes to a particular URL on the directory server, sends its JSON parameters, and then receives it and chews through the data. So there's a search ability, there's a create ability, or save. Save basically does the same thing as creating and updating. The identifier is basically the only thing that makes the difference between whether it's a new item or an existing item. There's remove. So like I said, everything that you can do on the web front end of the directory server can be done from a network server. So that's about all I have as far as the demo.
Okay. Any questions so far before we move on to other things? Okay. One of the things that we're doing as part of being incubated by Apereo is trying to get, first, obviously, validation that what we have is something that is productive. So there's a technical validation. But there's also kind of a business validation. Part of that business validation is getting people comfortable with the open source process. A lot of these participants are folks that have leveraged open source in the past, but have never been a contributor to an open source project. So we have to educate them on what it means to be a contributor, all the intellectual property issues and those kinds of things. And so Apereo's been very, very valuable in that process, helping us to understand what the license terms should look like, and also what kind of non-disclosures people have to have in place, or what kinds of agreements that the participants have to have. And so as folks have become more knowledgeable about that, their view of how they want to participate and how they want to interact with the project has evolved. So the pilot is really to kind of shake out a lot of those things. What are the kinds of things that should be the next target, obviously, for technical development by the team, but also we're looking to get more actual code contributors. So in the beginning, there were about 4 different organization contributors and maybe about 5 or 6 developers that have been contributing. And as things have progressed and we've gotten some things accomplished, we're back down now to just the Technology Center providing resources to do development. So obviously that's not very healthy. We're looking for more folks to participate. But we're hoping that this pilot actually gets people excited about what we have and moves it forward a little bit. We are still very much endorsed by PESC, and we will produce a standard reference implementation, and the community college system in California will leverage EdExchange. That's already been decided, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to use it. But basically, you know, it's a whole process, as you guys might be aware, of kind of trying to keep that whole open source healthy. So the first thing you have to realize with a network like this is you can't just build it and wait for people to come, because its utility value isn't very high if you could only exchange things with a couple of people. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So the 2 vendors that have signed on, the National Student Clearinghouse and Parchment, represent about 15,000 institutions. It's a pretty nice way of seeding the network. Parchment has a ton of receivers, and the clearinghouse has a ton of senders, and you know they want to exchange stuff. In addition, we have 2 of the largest recipients of transcripts in the United States on the pilot program. The University of Phoenix, as well as Arizona State, which is, as you might know, the largest 4-year institution in the United States. They have over 100,000 students enrolled. So they get a ton of educational documents all the year. So they're going to be pushing things across the network at full space, but 12,000 kind of seeded institutions is pretty good. So we're hoping that, you know, this is going to be something that gets out of the gate and has some momentum behind it. So anyway, and then the final goal is to maintain the community so that we keep doing iterations as people think about it. Just in the early stages, we've gotten some very, very interesting, you know, what-ifs from people. One thing is that apparently, even within an educational system, there are very frequent and regular data exchanges. In the state of California, for example, the chancellor's office, in order for the community colleges to get paid for the enrollments they have, there's a set of standard reports. In those standard reports, oftentimes they carry PII data. And as it turns out, that exchange is, hopefully secure, but may not be always secure. But even looking beyond it, there's a ton of researchers in the system that are asking very interesting questions about how are we doing with student success criteria. And so they want to know, for example, what the Social Security number is of that individual student. And we tell them you can't have that because it's PII data. And so they figure out ways to get around that from time to time, and we shut them down and slap their hands and all the rest of it because they're doing something that technically is illegal in some ways. And so we hope to curb that. But it would be nice to have a secure exchange mechanism for the exchange of that data even within a system. So you might look at binary data exchange of an encrypted file going across the EdExchange network for the purposes of supporting research. So there's a ton of research institutions in the United States that would love to get their hands on all sorts of information. Like we have, we're deploying a common course management system in the state of California. So almost 2 million students interacting with the learning management system on a regular basis. What do they do? How frequently do they log in? What kinds of files do they access? All of those kinds of things. A wealth of data for a researcher to do. We have no mechanism really to get that data to a random researcher who has a valid request for that data. EdExchange could provide that service as well. So this is why we want to get this out and about a little bit more. Basically, I think I've talked about most of this already. The pilot participants, ideally, I think we're there. And they're going to continue to give development feedback all along the way. We will deploy one directory server network-wide in a pilot. That'll be hosted centrally. Still a little TBD, but probably the tech center. And then basically one network server per vendor in the pilot or locality in the pilot. So basically, for example, the pilot institution that uses Parchment to receive. So ironically, this is also University of Phoenix and ASU. They're Parchment customers, but they also want to get it independently of Parchment, which is supported, of course, by this mechanism. They will connect to the directory server. There's a vendor pilot and an institutional pilot that will send them information. And they, on the behalf, through EdExchange, and on behalf of their customer, they will take the information and deliver it in the format that that customer wants to have. So this is a very useful service because the vendor or the institution who's sending might only be capable of sending one kind of file. So they might only be able to send PDF, for example, whereas the institution really wants data. Parchment offers a service that converts PDF to XML to deliver to the vendors, or CSV to deliver to the institution. That's a really value-added service. So just because University of Phoenix is on the network and can receive an XML file directly, they may not be able to receive a PDF file because that violates all their processes, and they don't want to deal with that. They have to have somebody keying it in or verifying a scan. It's too much work. So we might see, kind of like multiple endpoints depending on what the capabilities of the sender are. So we're going to work out a lot of that mechanism through the pilot. So we're accepting pilot participants last month. It's still open if you really want to hop on board. We're welcome. We are doing the onboarding this month to get people fired up, and then the pilots will start to develop their own integrations. This is very lightweight. It could be as simple as just creating a folder that files get dropped in on a server that's hosting the network server. So you don't have to have a full integration to participate in the pilot. We, of course, would love that, but you don't need to have that. And then we're going to start the testing period over this summer, and then complete the real testing period in September, October, and then review everything in October with our team, and then report out at the next PESC conference in the fall. Questions? So I covered a few of these already, but these are some of the frequently asked ones. Can there be multiple servers that serve the same institution? Yes, for the reasons I talked about. And then what are the rules for file storage? Basically, this is a concern that people have had about the Texas server. We're not storing any files. There's even a movement to, if the network server on the other end isn't up when you actually initiate the transfer, and you're somehow an intermediary, that you just delete the file and report an error back and ask people to retransmit. Because there's a lot of concern about where those files and what that private information is, where the private information really is. So some questions we need community involvement to answer, and this is why we're hoping to get a healthy participation in the pilot. What's the criteria for being included in the exchange? Do you have to be a PESC member? Do you have to be an in-common member? What's the mechanism for doing that? How do we vet people? You know, if I just stand up a network server and say, I service every institution in the United States, I go up to NIST, or I go up to some other service that has all, the College Board maybe has all the institutions listed. I throw up a network server, and I say, I'm servicing everybody. Send me all your data. How do we validate that those people are real people, or is there, you know, some kind of spamming thing that we have to be on guard for? How will the registry be updated and maintained? Who's going to manage that process? It's probably going to be someone who's contracted with by PESC. And then, of course, then that generates, well, where does PESC get the money to do it? So we have to work out those things. And then how will ongoing development be funded? Well, you know, we are at the Tech Center. We are dependent upon EdExchange for some of our initiatives, so we have the support of the Chancellor's Office to continue development, but we really would like to see more development ongoing and have more people doing the work. So here's more. I think I've covered most of these already. And then really, what other business processes have to be developed in all of this? Is there some kind of non-disclosure agreement that all network service providers have to sign? University of Phoenix, for example, for every vendor they sign up with, they make them sign a non-disclosure agreement. They're concerned that, you know, if they're getting something from someone else who hasn't signed their non-disclosure, what does that mean? You know, in an open network kind of a thing, the fact that everybody has to sign a non-disclosure agreement doesn't quite mesh with that. So there's a few business terms and business issues that people either have to become comfortable with, or we have to change some of the goals, perhaps, of the project. So here are some resources. Certainly, if you'd like to participate in the standards effort at PESC, I'm the co-chair, Lou Del Zampo, L. Del Zampo at ccctechcenter.org. The pilot coordination is being run by a gentleman out of Parchment, Jason Weaver, and there's his email address if you want to be a pilot. Our project site is a Google site, so that the URL is listed there. We are up on GitHub. There's a lot of information. Wes was showing some of that up on GitHub. And then we have regular meetings every 2 weeks of the EdExchange working group now. It's open to people who want to listen in and participate. And again, you would send me an email if you'd want to participate in that. Right now, you don't have to be a PESC member to participate in those calls. And then if you're looking for additional tools or additional documentation, that is, we have a community site that we're putting up to provide feedback for the pilot. And then we'll be posting other things up on that community site as well. We'll publish that out once that's live. Okay, any questions? Yes?
Who do you see down the road EdExchange playing a role in district to district?
Yes.
Communication as well, right? As students transfer from one district to another, for example.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, do we see a role for EdExchange in district-to-district transfers, such as a transfer from one college to another college, or sending transcript data or the moral equivalent? And yes, actually, within the state in California, that is the intended use. The eTranscript California project has been marginally successful, I would say. We don't have full participation, so we're hoping to do something a little bit better with EdExchange, because it'll be free, basically, to the colleges, and so we're hopeful about that. We're also looking to develop an adapter for the highest value student information systems in the state to connect directly to an EdExchange network server. So basically, for example, if you have Banner and you want to have a CSV file show up on the other side, having the adapter take what comes out of the network server and drop a CSV. Those kinds of things we're looking at doing independent of this project. So yeah, there's those kinds of things are what I was referring to with the researchers and stuff, their interest in data. And so it's just, we're trying to, that's why EdExchange was picked as opposed to transcript exchange or something else. We're trying to position it more as a, an open delivery network for different kinds of uses. In the back? So the question is, what do we see as the biggest challenge right now? In the short term, having a healthier developer resource base. Wes isn't the only person that develops at the tech center, so I can spread it around a little bit in case Wes wins the lottery and decides to say forget it. But the biggest challenge is that that's just. There's a tunnel vision that comes when you're the only people doing the development, as you guys might know from working on open source projects before. So I think that's our biggest challenge, is getting more developer contributors right now is what we're really looking for. Yeah, good question. Another question? Did you have another?
Yeah, kind of maybe a strange follow-up, but one of the big needs that I see out in the market is getting rostering information out to ed tech vendors. There's one company that's doing this, Clever.
Yes.
Right? And they're developing a little bit of a monopoly.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think what's clever about them is the business model, not what they're actually accomplishing.
Sure.
But that seems like an area that's ripe for a similar approach, and maybe even a growth area for something like EdExchange to help schools provide kind of a clearinghouse of more real-time rostering data out to different services that they want to subscribe to within their own schools. Does that seem relevant to you?
So the question is, just to repeat it, is there a relevancy to EdExchange and the exchange of roster data, a la Clever, in terms of, if you're a vendor providing a service, you're reliant on what's the list of students in that district in order to populate your service. How do you get that data to your service, basically? So the interesting thing about EdExchange is that I could say yes to everything, right? It's like, yeah, you can send anything you want in a secure way, but the sender and the receiver have to agree on the payload format of that data. So the interesting thing about Clever is that they provide an API, and at the end point of the API is a standard set of formatting for the data that they pull out of the system. So if Clever, for example, was interested in being an EdExchange participant, then it would level the playing field quite a bit. They could get that data and then offer to deliver it in a variety of formats to people, and they wouldn't have to develop an integration to the web service API that Clever provides. So I could see that being a positive in this. Just like I said, we're going to facilitate transfers of students between one institution and another within the community college district. We have to do something very similar to what Clever's doing. We have to format the data and figure out, we are in this online ed initiative right now. A student who is enrolled at, say, Sacramento City College, and they deploy, I believe, Banner. So they're a Banner school. And that student is unable to get into a course section that they need to matriculate out in a timely way, but it's offered in an online version by Butte College, for example. And so right now, there's a huge amount of work that student has to do. They have to enroll at Butte College. They have to take the assessment test at Butte College. They have to apply for financial aid at Butte College if they're also on financial aid. On and on and on, just to take one online course. It's crazy. So what we're doing with the online initiative is providing a mechanism to exchange all that information from Sac City up to Butte via programmatic means so that the student doesn't have to do all of that. Because really the end result is we know that they're able to go to the college. They're already going to Sac City. They don't, what are the requirements of Butte? It can't be that much different, right? So we're going to transfer all that information over EdExchange, deliver it to Butte. Butte will load it into their SIS and other systems. And then through the magic of interfaces with Canvas, which is the one we selected for statewide rollout, that student, next time they log into their Canvas instance, they will see, boom, there's another course that's delivered by Butte in their list of courses. They can go in there and start interacting with the instructor. So that's our vision, and it's very similar to what Clever does. So the answer is yes, we're going to use EdExchange for that, but the hard part in this case is not EdExchange. The hard part is all of that data formatting and agreements to interchange. So, yeah. No, great question. Any others? Yep, back again.
Maybe a little bit of a silly question. Actually, sat in on some of your meetings as well. But this seems like it's mostly a peer-to-peer type of exchange, right?
Uh-huh.
So you guys seem kind of like a challenge or a hurdle to get over, and a lot of people are looking to move stuff off of this. And this kind of
Move off of what? I'm sorry. Yep. Sure. Well, so the question is, do we see it as a challenge that this is peer-to-peer and that institutions are moving some of these services out into the cloud or other kinds of things? So a couple comments. One is that the vendor, I was thinking there's a diagram still up there. I apologize. The vendors can provide those services by hosting a network server on behalf of the school. So they can have a multi-tenant network server in their, infrastructure, and when something comes in for one of their customers, they can deliver it through whatever mechanisms that customer has agreed to use with that vendor. So it's not really peer-to-peer in that sense, even though the network's peer-to-peer for EdExchange. It's really kind of staggered. There's a vendor relationship. So in it also, we don't care where you host the network server. If you want to host it, on Amazon, host it on Amazon. We don't really care. So, and then how you get it down to your student information system or your LMS or anything else is really up to you. So don't see it too much as a challenge in that respect, honestly, but still a good question because maybe we need to do better about what we say when we say peer-to-peer, what that really means. So I'll have to think about that a little bit. So thanks. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. And I think the slides will go up on the conference site. So, but if you don't get one, you have hopefully captured my email and send me an email if you have further questions. All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Wes.